Welcome to Monday. Welcome to Good Thinking Live. I am so glad you're here. Uh, as usual, please let me know that you're here and where you're from in the comments. And we're going to get started in just at the top of the hour, which is 9 a.m. on Mondays, Pacific time, and 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time elsewhere. Here too, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Good Thinking Live. Here we are, and this is our little bit of time to borrow just a teeny bit of time away from all the time we spend on what to think. You know, we're told what to think, and we have to show that we know what to think. And just to use a little bit of time to focus on improving how to think. That's all that the show is, the habit of good thinking. And we're going to be very specific because it's hard to say, okay, how do we create all of these good thinking habits? So at the end of today, you are going to know in general, or at the end of today, after we do this show together, you're going to know in general how to create habits, and you're going to know specifically how to apply that to creating just one, and very valuable good thinking habit. All right, let me know that you're here. Hi, Suman. Hi, Chi. I've always mispronounced names because of two things. So I want to just say that if I don't see you in the comments start scrolling and sometimes I miss, but I will get to them later. And I hope that you are participating. And also because it's very hard for me to see. If I put my glasses on, I can't see one thing. And if I take them off, I can't see another. So thus are the aging eyes. So we're going to do the best we can because this is a participation show. So Stephen from Cascadia, yay! The thing that's cool about this show and about LinkedIn Live specifically, and you may be watching on YouTube as well, is that the international audience, unlike some of the other live platforms where you're kind of in your silo of sameness, the cool thing about LinkedIn Live is there are people from all over the world, anywhere that LinkedIn works. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Yay, I pronounced your name right. Thank you. Sometimes I see the name and it's kind of a longer name and I have to read it quickly and pronounce it. So I apologize in advance if I get your names wrong. All right. Question number two after who are you and where are you from? Question number two is, how many habits do you have? And when I ask that, I start thinking myself like, well, I have the habit of when my alarm goes off, I used to have the habit of hitting snooze, but now I have the habit of getting up. And maybe I even have the habit of when I go in to brush my teeth, I have the habit of checking my email on my phone or social media on my phone. I have a habit of drinking coffee every morning. So habits can be just things that you don't even recognize as habits. And habits can be really good habits and can be obviously really bad habits. And sometimes we don't really know if it's a bad habit or a good habit because we like it, like my drinking coffee habit. Feels like a good habit because I like it. It's something I look forward to. But that's the kind of nature of habits. And habits are not intentions. So for example, if I say I intend to get in better shape, or I intend to train for this marathon, that is more of a resolution or maybe even an intention. But there's a reason that these things usually don't result in habits. But we're going to change that after today. And it's particularly difficult to apply it to good thinking because good thinking is not our human default way of thinking. Our human default way of thinking is quick emotional gut stimulus response. But we can manipulate that stimulus response or influence that stimulus response in a good way to create good thinking habits. So who's up? Who's into it? All right, one chicken for all the people who already are ready to create good thinking habits, or two chickens. This is my little, yay, chickens. All right. You need a trigger for any habit. So a trigger can be a stimulus, like your alarm goes off, or you get a notification, or you can create a stimulus, a trigger that you use to influence you to do a certain behavior. So we see triggers all the time. Beep, buzz. Oops, got to check my phone to see who texted me. That kind of thing. Or my alarm goes off, or I get in the car, I turn on my radio. These are stimulus response, and it kind of becomes automatic. We learn this from Pavlov's dog. The little bell goes off and the dog starts salivating, but that was a manipulated or influenced response. And we could do the same thing with creating good habits. And in this particular case, good thinking habits. Now, good thinking is probably a bigger goal than works well with a habit. So we may have to kind of whittle down the good thinking habit into one specific thing to make it work. Before we do, let's remember what good thinking is, at least in the context of this show and what we're doing. Good thinking is really part of a three-legged stool. And the three-legged stool is creative thinking, strategic thinking, and critical thinking. And people say, what's the difference? Good question. Creative thinking is looking at challenges and opportunities from fresh perspectives, turning things around, turning it upside down, trying to see new ways of approaching. Maybe a critical thinking question would be, how can I rearrange this problem to see if I can come up with a new solution, a unique solution? Strategic thinking is generating and applying insights and opportunities to overcome barriers and solve problems and accomplish goals. So when you're getting insights from information or breaking down facts, like the 5 whys, why, getting to root cause analysis, that is a form of strategic thinking. So you might be thinking, isn't that critical thinking? Turns out when you can tease out these different kinds of thinking, you can assure yourself or make sure that you can create a habit of covering all the 3 legs of a stool. So here's where critical thinking is different. And that's going to be a little hint that's going to be our focus today, is critical thinking. All right. Let's say hi, Moazam. Nice to see you. Nice to see you there. I'm so glad that people are checking in and letting me know. So I'm going to get to critical thinking. And then I want you to tell me if you think your default leg of the stool is critical thinking, strategic thinking, or creative thinking. What's the one that you go to most? All right, here's the critical thinking. Critical thinking is a tool for assessing information quality and relevance. And it really comes down to reliability and relevance, judging and making rational decisions on what to do or what to believe. So you see how that's different than digging and getting to the root cause. Now, these 3 kinds of thinking, these 3 kinds of good thinking, they have overlap. It's not like, this is strictly this and this is strictly that. But when you start teasing apart the differences, like a critical thinking question might be, how can we find out if this is really true? And one way we can't find out if it's really true? By using our intuition. This feels really true to me. That is not a measure of whether it is true. So it's not a good critical thinking tool. So when you're validating the accuracy of information or checking whether evidence supports the argument, you're looking for biases, seeing the validity of something, that the bias is in there, or busting assumptions. Hint, hint. I'm going to make a little hint, because busting assumptions is a hint to the critical thinking habit we're going to do today. This is critical thinking. So don't be vague. We can't be vague about what it means to engage in good thinking if we're going to create a good thinking habit, because it turns out that habits need to be very specific and they kind of need to be easy. So we're going to make a good thinking habit really specific and really easy so we can start to do it. All right. So we're going to need to be more specific than good thinking. So we'll need a precise language. So you need a precise language for the habit. For example, speaking of precise language, there's some little tricks in terms of how language works. So we know that language, little word switches affect our perception. We know that if I use the word smash, it's going to be more impactful and emotive than if I use the word hit, for example. We know this from Elizabeth Loftus and how she has been able to show that juries can be manipulated by just switching certain kinds of words. So be aware of that, number one. Number two, the specificity, like for example, let's say you're trying to figure out if people will vote. So if you go around and do a poll or you ask your friends, you're trying to make sure that they do vote, and you ask your friends, are you going to vote? That will be a very, you might think that's a very good measure of whether they'll vote or not vote. But a better question would be, how are you going to get your ballot to the box? Or what day are you going to vote? That level of specificity will give a better reading of, because it turns an intention into an actual action in your mind. And so that's a little hint also about how habits can work. All right, so we'll be very specific. We are going to create just one critical thinking habit. That's it. So the critical thinking habit is going to help us to see if the information is reliable and relevant. Now, do we need to see if do we have to go through this every single time we make a decision? Oh, is this coffee hot enough? Oh, is this relevant or reliable? No, we don't need to use critical thinking for every single decision we make. But we need to use it for important decisions, and we may even need to use it for decisions that don't seem important, but they are. And one of them might be, for example, I'm going to, quit my job and try to find another job. That's an important thing. Or I'm going to get healthy. That's kind of an important thing, not specific enough in either case. But one of the things that might be interesting to think about is the importance of responding on social media. Might not be a big deal to just like something or share something. But depending on what happens with all of this data, it may be a more important decision than you think. So this critical thinking habit that we're going to talk about can be used to decide even whether you should like or share or comment on someone's social media post. And this is hard because like-mindedness makes it very tricky. It's like the chocolate sauce on the vanilla ice cream. When we have something that we feel is right in our gut, it definitely makes sense. It fuels our sense of similarity. It's very tempting to have the habit of just liking, especially if it's a friend, just a little harmless like, or, oh, that's good, I'm going to share that. So this is a critical thinking habit that you can also bring to a simple act of liking or sharing or posting on social media, because it may have a bigger impact than you think. So it may be a more important decision than we think about. All right. If you are here in the comments, what do you use most frequently? Critical thinking, strategic thinking, or creative thinking? And how much thought do you give on a scale of 1, not that much thought, to 5, a lot of thought? How much thought do you give to sharing or liking or commenting on social media? Maybe after today, you'll give it a little more thought, because we're going to get into one critical thinking habit that will help us make wiser decisions about this and make wiser decisions in every aspect of our lives. All right. So there are 3 critical thinking habits that help, kind of 3 good thinking questions rather, that help us, that we want to make a habit. But 3 is too many to start with. So I'm going to give you the 3 that are our goal. So imagine you're going to run a marathon. That's the goal. Asking these 3 questions is the goal. But the habit can't start with, okay, I'm going to start going out and running a marathon every day. The habit has to start small. And so we're going to break down the habit of asking these 3 critical thinking questions into the tiny habit that you can easily start kind of incorporating today. When I wanted to start a habit of drinking more water, I decided that I wanted to be more specific and that I wanted to make sure that I drank at least 40 ounces of water a day. And sometimes I would, maybe I would have a little bit of water with lunch, I never had water with my coffee. And I realized I was drinking like less than 8 ounces of water a day. And I knew that for our brains, we need sleep and water, and we need that to make good decisions. So how am I out there teaching good decision making when I'm not even drinking any water? So I put this little water bottle, this little one, and I filled it like halfway. And I left it by my sink in the morning. So after I brushed my teeth every morning, I had a half a bottle of this. And then slowly I started filling it up more and started filling it more. I didn't beat myself up if I didn't finish the whole thing. Even if I just drank part of it, I was heading in the right direction. And that's the goal with habits, is put things where you're going to bump into them, where it's easy. Think about the place, and then just aim toward the goal. Don't beat yourself up and say, I didn't do it for 3 days. I'm never going to do this. Just make sure that you maybe start with a sip. I started with like a half of this bottle. Now, and for years, it's probably been 4 years, every morning, I get up and I fill this. Is this 38 ounces? 40 ounces? You can tell I'm in the US, I'm talking about ounces of water every morning, room temperature water, after I brush my teeth. Now, if I drink throughout the day, great. But if I don't, I know that I've had enough water. So this is the same kind of technique. And I have enough bad habits, and I've had enough habits that I've abandoned. But that's one that I have it, and I'm happy about it. And I'm proud of myself for creating these little tiny changes and bumping into them and putting them in my way so that I can change the habit. Or create the habit. So here are the 3 questions that are kind of the marathon. So this is the marathon. The 3 questions of the marathon are: what assumption will I challenge? Is the assumption reliable? And is the assumption relevant? And we're going to break these down so you'll understand. We'll kind of all have an understanding. But the 3 questions is kind of this. But we're going to start with just this. And the one habit that we're going to create today is just to ask ourselves each day, and then we can apply it to big decisions. But just get in the habit of once a day asking ourselves, or naming one assumption. That's it. That's the equivalent of like maybe drinking a few sips of this. Name one assumption. We can go whole days without even thinking about the assumptions that we put into the way we think or the decisions we make. So we're going to start super small. And it's just going to be, and you just have to pick a place, like maybe in your car, or maybe while you're brushing your teeth. You identify one of your life's assumptions. Maybe the assumption is brushing your teeth is enough for your oral health. And, then you can figure out, we'll get into how you can start busting that assumption, but we're going to get there later. So just start with name one assumption. How many people think that that's too much? Naming one assumption is too much. Yes? No? One assumption? All right. So then, what's an important decision? That's up to you. Does an important decision involve health or wealth, or something as small as okay, she says, I like the idea, don't beat yourself up. I think that is a great, why am I not having, here we go, having a little technical difficulties with my thing. I think that's a great one. And that, I like that. I like that a lot. Don't beat yourself up. Now, for a critical thinking habit, I think don't beat yourself up would be a hard habit, because you would have to that's like maybe like this. That's like the whole big water bottle. So you have to start with little things that prevent you from beating yourself up. And that's not concrete enough, perhaps. So, but the good thinking habit is really, we're trying to create a critical thinking habit. And it is not, it doesn't necessarily feel good because, like I said, it's not our default way of thinking. So we're going to get down to it. When you think about what assumption will I challenge, the first step is naming one assumption. Now, I'm going to go into how this can proceed to create a whole good thinking habit, big habit, but the first baby step is to name the first assumption. So question is, what assumption will I challenge? Now, assumptions are things that are accepted as true to happen or sure to happen without relevant, reliable proof. So what's something that I'm accepting as true or sure to happen for which I don't have relevant, reliable truth? So I need to decide whether to move out of my home office or get a bigger office. I'm going to challenge the assumption, for example, that the market for my product will continue to grow. I'm like, wow, I've got this online learning. It's going crazy right now. I'm going to start, I'm going to really ramp up and bring a team in, and we're going to kind of now bring up, move out of my home office, get a bigger office, hire a bunch of people. Maybe one of the assumptions I should be challenging is whether the market for my product will continue to grow. That could be a simple assumption to bust or a simple assumption to challenge. The second thing, if you're getting deeper, if you're going from a half a bottle here to the whole bottle here, not quite to this, the second thing you might say is the assumption reliable? Like, would it be safe to assume this? And why? What are some reasons that it would be safe to assume that the market for my product will continue to grow? List the reasons. And then, what are the reasons that it would not be safe to assume this? So whatever your assumption is, maybe the assumption is something simple like brushing my teeth is good enough for oral health. Why would it be good enough to assume this? Well, maybe because I've never had a cavity before. But why would it not be safe to assume this? Maybe because I haven't been to a dentist in 3 years, something like that. Now, something to be aware of. There is one condition that is not necessary for your confidence in the reliability of your assumption. Guess what it is? Any guesses? Anyone? No one? Your confidence. Your confidence in the assumption is not enough to make the assumption reliable. It's not one of the conditions. All right. So that's now we've kind of filled up. We've gone from a little bit. I think we filled up this whole water bottle by saying, is the assumption reliable? Why might it be reliable? Why might not it be reliable? Now we're moving into the whole water bottle, the whole thing. And the last question is, how strongly is this assumption supported by relevant evidence? Now, one of the hints, if you've been on to the show, been on Good Thinking in the past, you'll know that the 2 R's, reliability and relevance, are 2 really important critical thinking R's to think about. So how strongly is this assumption supported by relevant evidence? Will we be successful because we will exceed growth projections? So, I've assumed that I should move into a bigger space. Because my business is going to continue to grow. All right. Now, is the evidence to support that assumption reliable? I don't know. Why might it not be? Why might it be? And now, is it relevant? Sometimes you're asking, are the sources I'm using relevant? Like, I looked at the economic indicators and it says that online learning is going to grow X%. But is the source relevant? Maybe the source is provided by an online learning organization that's trying to go public, something like that. So will we be successful because we will exceed growth projections? So what is relevant? Am I relevant? Is it relevant that my growth in my online learning classes have gone up by 180% in the last 3 months? And is it relevant that it will continue to go up? Well, maybe the fact that we're under quarantine has a big impact, and maybe it's not as relevant looking at the last 3 months as it is to go back maybe over the last 2 years, for example. What if growth data is less relevant than dwindling cash flow? Like, what if I'm discounting my online training so much to grow that I'm dwindling cash flow and I really shouldn't move into a new office. All right. So how strongly is this assumption supported by relevant evidence? All right. So you can see that this R, assumption, reliability, and relevance, is the beginning of creating a good thinking, a critical thinking habit. But the habit that we need to start is just once a day, in some place, identify one assumption. Now, a little bit more about habits. I'm going to give a little bonus tip. If you really, really want to ramp up your creative thinking, you have the science is really clear that creative thinking goes hand in hand with walking. And there's a study out of, and it's not just because Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs in the past and Mark Zuckerberg now hold meetings where they walk. It's actually based on science. And there was a study out of Stanford where researchers found that walking boosted creative output by 60%. And responses, what they did was they looked at responses that were novel, like no other participant thought of that response or idea. And it didn't matter where you were. So if you were walking inside or outside, it was really the act of walking that helped provide creative output. And I say that because if you need to kind of get your juices flowing, or if you take a walk, that might be a good time or place to think about or name one assumption. But you want to think about where you make decisions. Maybe you make decisions in your car. Maybe you make decisions in the morning when you're brushing your teeth or in the shower or sitting here in your office. This is my home office. No virtual today. No virtual screen. See Smeagol in the background? Maybe you know, where do you make decisions? And you want to make it easy. So then you want to think about a place. You want to think about a trigger. We're going to get to triggers in a minute. Critical thinking is hard, so make the habit easy. All habits should be easy, tiny little baby steps, not big, huge steps to start. All right. Like getting in shape or saving money or advancing your career. Take little tiny steps. Set $5 aside. Learn one new fact. Meet one person, connect with one person on LinkedIn to expand your network because you're trying to look to get into a new field. These tiny baby steps. Make it fast. Make your habit fast. Don't commit to spending more than 3 minutes by identifying the one assumption. Just make it fast. Identify one assumption. So you're going to think of a place, a time. We're going to get into a trigger because remember, it's stimulus, response, reward. That's how you create a habit. So make it fast. You want one question to start with, one thing to start with for critical thinking. And then you got to get a stimulus. You got to get the stimulus. So maybe the stimulus is brushing your teeth. Make it something that you do. Maybe it's getting in your car and instead of right before you turn on the radio, you identify one assumption. Or you want to take a walk because you want to have creative juices flowing. So you put your shoes by your bed, and when your alarm goes off, you put your shoes on. And that's the first step. And when you put your shoes on, that's when you name one assumption. When you tie your shoes, that's when you name one assumption. Think of a stimulus, something that you do anyway, that you can tie to identifying one assumption. All right, there is one little trick I want to tell you about batching. And this goes back to the water thing. So I love my morning coffee. And I knew that if I started drinking morning coffee, that I probably wouldn't have enough room in my stomach. I wouldn't be thirsty enough to do my water. So I batched my desire for my morning coffee with the water. So I cannot have my morning coffee unless I drink my water. There's another thing. Exercising can be very tedious. And so our exercise machine down in our basement would just sit gathering cobwebs. I mean, at least from my perspective, until I identified the fact that I can only watch my favorite television shows when I'm on the elliptical. So I have my certain elliptical shows that are like a series, like Ozark or Schitt's Creek or The Office, all of these shows that I love, I can only watch when I am on the elliptical. And so that's batching. So, and I think they also call it, bundling or something like this in the habit world and the habit science, they call it bundling. But I've been batching the stuff that I don't like with the stuff that I do like. So if you don't like the feeling of naming an assumption, because it doesn't feel good, it's kind of like being wrong. It doesn't feel good. Then you can batch it with something you like. So for example, maybe the minute you log on to your favorite social media platform, you see the first post that you like or don't like. That's when you have to name one assumption. And the thing about that is or the first time you open up social media, you like to look at these posts, that's when you name one assumption. All right. So if you just start with that kind of batching, that can be, your place can be a trigger, something you do every day. Make it easy, make it small, head in the right direction. Know that your one little trick is naming an assumption, one assumption. You start there. But with your goal, eventually, your marathon goal of being able to, every time you have a big decision, you're then in the habit of saying, okay, what's an assumption? Is it reliable? Is it relevant? And just boom, 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 going through those things. My assumption is that this article that I see my friend posting on social media is probably true because it talks trash about someone I don't like, or it says something that really conforms to what I believe. What's an assumption? Maybe my assumption is that this person is a reliable source. Is it a reliable source? Is it true? Why might it not be true? Might there be a conflict of interest? And then, is it relevant? These are the things that you can do to begin to create your very first habit. Not first, maybe you have a lot of good thinking habits, but your first critical thinking habit, your first truly critical thinking habit. And you don't want to confuse it with other cool habits. There's a lot of cool habits that you can have. Having gratitude is a wonderful habit. Meditation is a wonderful habit. Being healthy, exercising, all wonderful habits. This critical thinking habit is probably one that we need to put into our mental toolbox sooner rather than later, as we are bombarded by more and more information than ever before. And then we resort to our filtering mechanism, our normal human filtering mechanism, which resorts to biases and shortcuts and heuristics and all the things that make our lovely human brains what they are. So this is one way, one tiny habit, one little teeny tiny habit that you can incorporate to make yourself a better thinker. All right. I don't know. I don't have very many comments here on. I see some comments on my phone version, and I don't see very many comments on my here on my screen. So if I didn't get to you, and then I will afterwards. And if you're watching this after the live show, feel free to comment. I'll check in and see. Let me know your progress and how your habit of just identifying one assumption is working. And also be sure on LinkedIn, you can always catch the show live on LinkedIn, but we are also streaming on YouTube. So the Becky Saltzman at Becky Saltzman on YouTube. So smash that bell so you get the notifications. Subscribe. Go to YouTube and subscribe, because we're going to have all kinds of great ways to spend a little bit of time on how to improve how we think. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Have a great week. Let me know, send me a message or comment. Let me know, what is one assumption that keeps creeping up for you? Is there one that kind of constantly creeps up? And maybe that assumption is, I'm right. And a little hint, one of the two conditions for critical thinking is the ability to change your mind, to question how right you feel, and reflective skepticism. So if your common assumption is I'm right, that might be the one. Thanks for being here.